Well, first of all, follow up, right? You think that it's done, it's not done. You have to continue following up until it's all the way closed and you got your check.
Commercial market is tough. It's been slowing down. Prices got way too high, way too fast, partly because of Chinese purchasers. What we're seeing is continued pressure on pricing, right? So something comes on the market, especially the entry market, entry level, and it's immediately picked up, sold, and that's continuing to put upward pressure on prices, right?
Everything about this apartment just sings to me. It's just very sexy space.
You know, we're finding in general that it is a very optimistic market, particularly the ultra high net worth market, right? So the Palm Beach on the ocean market, the Hamptons on the ocean market, the New York City high end, wherever that is, because it's all over the place market. We're finding so many headline making buyers that it's incredible.
Right.
As a lot of the articles that have come out recently would suggest, I think new development is way off the boil. So for example, in 2017, 8.9 billion sales closed. In 2018, less than 4.9 billion. Huge difference, right? So developers may be in a little bit of hot water. I think the rest of the market is actually okay. You know, people are taking longer to sell. You know, all this volatility makes people nervous, but there are positives and negatives to all of this.
A lot of people forget, oh, contract signed, that's it, right? I'm home free. No, you're not home free till you get that check, right? Second of all, really know your stuff cold. When I say cold, I mean cold. You have to know every single property that's sold around you, why it's sold for that price, and why you're proposing itself, this one sell for this price. And know all the objections to overcome. Everyone knows what's wrong with the property, right? You know the kitchen's too small, you know the ceilings are too low, you know it's too dark, you know it faces the wrong way. You know whatever the problem is, have talking points prepared to overcome that objection when somebody comes in through that door. And say, oh yes, it faces the wrong way, but it has this beautiful terrace. And you know what? It's great value because it faces the wrong way. You pay double if it faces the right way. So always have those talking points ready.
So now everybody's like, okay, so they have a new high. All the sellers are expecting this new high. I'm going to wait. And that's what they're doing, it's a pause, and not good for real estate, obviously.
What about,
you know, investment really is a matter of when you buy and when you sell. So if we wind up being forced to sell, it's a problem, right? But it's really a matter of that. It's a great investment if you have holding power.
I think it's interesting because we were discussing in the green room. I get to chat with you earlier, which is so nice. I enjoyed that. You said that people are really calling a lot more lately. What are you attributing that to? Is it the lower rates and mortgages? What is going on?
Mostly lower mortgage rates, but I think it's everything. It's a general optimistic attitude, full employment. Actual employment gains, meaning people have more after-tax dollars.
Right.
But the lower mortgage rates also affect people who already own homes, right? They're all refinancing. They'll have this money trickling in their pockets, right? Go tinkle, tinkle. And they're shopping. So look at Walmart. Great results. And future earnings have been upped as a result. Each individual person has to look at that themselves, right? And generally, when you rent, you're not renting as good a product as if you were buying it. You're also not improving it. You're living in it as is. So it's also a huge lifestyle choice. You know, I myself, if I were to go out and rent, I'd rent something inexpensive in a nice area that worked. But if I want to buy something nice. So it's a big difference in lifestyle.
Which is a better bargain these days?
Better bargain is probably a rental, but that doesn't make it better. And by the way, I think the overall story for next year is going to be buy the dip.
Buy the dip in prices?
So in other words, wait for prices to come in?
Yes, buy the dip. I think developers are going to be stuck. They're going to give many more incentives. We're finding all kinds of developers coming up to New York from Miami this winter, have all these plans, from LA, from everywhere. People are going to have to adjust, and that adjustment will give us an opportunity to buy the dip.
Two sides. So you're only paying one side. So in fact, you would be 4% to our 5.38. So it's not quite as bad as it sounds.
What do you think of Melbourne and the real estate profession as you've learnt about it while you've been here the last few days?
I think as a general rule, everyone I've met is far more professional on a much higher level than the average broker in New York. And the reason for that, I was telling the young lady, was because in New York, many of our brokers are part-time agents. Right. And I would say the majority are part-time agents, and they can't make a living. That's a problem. So if you're part-time, you're never going to be a professional, ever. If you're not full-time doing this day in and day out, knowing everything that's going on, you have a big advantage, and people are making a living and they eat from this business, which is very important to keeping the profession high.
The key thing to keep in mind with luxury buyers is that they live in a luxury world. So the care and feeding of a luxury buyer is very different than the average buyer. They expect you to respond very quickly. They expect you to be always available to them. They expect you to know your stuff cold. And they just expect general respect and kindness, which more so than the average person, because that's their world, that's what they're used to. So you have to be up on that level to deal with them effectively.
Ooh, that's a really good one. Do you have another one you want to share that you can think of?
Well, besides just knowing your stuff and, being always gracious and always available, I think those are the key things to keep them engaged. Then it's, of course, listening skills. You have to listen really carefully to what they say and to what they don't say. So you'll have a husband and a wife, and the husband will walk through and say, yeah, that's nice, it's a nice view, and the wife will be kind of making little sounds, not saying anything negative, but it's negative. Listen for all those nonverbal cues. They are more important than the actual verbal ones, because they really reveal what they're thinking. And I think that's the most important with luxury and non-luxury buyers alike. Individuals are doing almost the same thing, right? They're saying someone bought a house last year for $200,000, $2 million, $20 million, putting it back on the market this year and expecting a 50% increase. They're not going to get it. In fact, we can track lots of people who have suffered losses in the last year of something they bought a year ago.
Do you give?
In reality, most people don't need a 30-year fix, right? So the 10-year arm, which, for example, Citi said they were offering a 2.75 right now. That probably makes more sense than the 3.5, 30. But people like the comfort of the 30, even though they're only staying in the home now. 13 years versus 7 years that it's been. More pressure on supply. People are staying put.
They are. They really
very
are,
bad
right?
for supply. Very
tell
bad.
me
They
the
find
taxes
that
are
they
high.
wind up selling for more the next time around. That's the funny part.
All of those
even in the
things-
last year.
Right. All of them.
Well, I was very fortunate in that, first of all, I was an accountant for a motion picture company, so there's two parts to this. But first, I was an accountant for a motion picture company, United Artists, which you may remember.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I'm old
and
enough
so,
to.
Yeah, so we made Rocky, these are all that big era, Godfather, all those movies, United
Right.
Artists movies. And because of that, an attorney referred me Barbara Streisand as one of my very first clients. So I, knowing nothing, which I admitted to him, I don't know anything, I just went into this business. He goes, no, but you're honest, don't worry. Take care of her. And I did, 19 years, she was my client. And the media followed me because I had her as a client.
Right.
Why is things
Because
why are things
there's
slowing
too
down?
much inventory of the type that they're looking to sell. So new development is an example. There's everywhere you go, there's a hole, right? New York City, there's a hole everywhere you go. and so, right? So what happens? All these new buildings, banks got back into the financing business of buildings. They're doing better with clawbacks, etc. But they're still in the financing business of buildings, I guess, nowhere to deploy money. So when there's money, guess what? There's going to be building.
It's so
Clearly.
Well,
you don't have $billion
but you have
a
to
year.
know your stuff, right?
Right.
It's not, you don't get a second chance, okay? The thing about luxury also is you do not get a second chance. If you don't make it the first day out with them, you're likely not getting a second day out, and someone else will take your place, and there are throngs of people waiting to take your place. So do your homework, do your job, don't be nervous, be gracious. Be kind, always kind, because also people pay attention how you treat the waiter in a restaurant, how you treat the doorman in a building. It's very important, and also be very authentic. I find authentic, it's going to shine through one way or the other. Whoever you are, be authentic you, just the best authentic you. Right, and that's why Vegas is doing better. That's why Seattle is doing better. Their supplies are not as high. They're going lower, and their prices, though, are inching up to a point where I think they will have pullback as well.
So here in
And then I started getting very engaged with the media, and I befriended. I realized this is a good place to go, and I befriended journalists, and I did their work for them. So I would propose a story. Here's a story you should write. This is why. And sometimes they took it, and sometimes they didn't. But when they took it, often they would feel guilty and quote me. And by quoting me, I got a big brand, and that's how I basically broke out from the bunch. So
And that's the other interesting thing you mentioned in your speech, in your presentation. even though you work for someone, make sure that you build your own individual brand.
Yes, very important.
It is very important, and I think I think if that's a really important takeout for agents and salespeople here in Melbourne, to build their own individual
And differentiate.
brand.
Right?
Absolutely.
Why should I hire you?
Exactly.
Right? And keep asking yourself that. Why should I hire you? Okay?
Great.
I can hire Perry, I can hire Susan. Why you? And always come up with a more refined answer to that, and several answers, because not one size fits all, right? We all know the clients, we're all different.
Exactly. Now, one final question.
Sure.
Can we see you back here next September?
I'm here. You tell me.
Great.
I can't wait. I love it here.
That's a great one. That's a great one, because really, if you don't deal with them in their way, then you're never getting through to them, right? And it's so important to communicate, and that's the key thing, is communication.
Yeah, they're
Smiling and engaging them,
Yeah.
but not too much, right? Think of yourself walking through a store. You want somebody to be available to you, answer a question, but you don't want them hounding you, right? Because then you feel uncomfortable. So you have to walk that walk, but not too close. And if you don't care, right? If you don't care enough to do a brochure, a flyer, something pretty, why should they care? Right? You have to show them that you care. You took the time as the realtor. You care about this property. You're sharing your caring with them. So that is so important. The elevation, the quality of what you're putting out, and that it's available is so important. One example, I say apartment prices continue to be flat, which is what they are right now. So they're not down, they're flat. There will be good deals to be had here and there if you have a great broker. Listen to the first bid, because it may be your only bid.
Really?
Yeah, it's not a
What about
super
commercial
frothy.
real estate?
Commercial, well, there was just an overhaul of rental apartments and how they're going to be taxed and how they're going to be able to raise pricing in rentals if you own a rental building. So that market's down 20%. And the rest of the commercial market, look, there's so much money chasing so few assets, it holds it up, right? So the low interest rate environment raises all tides and boats.
You made an interesting point about if you have a bidder, really consider that bidder. Because there are a lot of regulations too when I'm making a bid, right? Whether it's a condo or a co-op or whatever, I have to have a certain amount of net worth, too, right? And liquidity. What are some of the criteria for that?
Well, depending on the property, right? So in a very fancy building, we just sold an apartment at 965th, it's pretty much all cash. You have to have 10 times assets. So if you pay 10, you have to have $100 million net worth you have to show. So it really goes all over the place to the point where it's a condo and there are almost no requirements. Buy-sell analysis is always a key analysis that we go through with every single buyer. We say to them, okay, you can buy this for this, you can rent it for this. Which one would you prefer, right? Because one is more permanent, one keeps you mobile. I think that millennials all want to buy, literally all. They're not buying right this minute, they don't have the money, they have student loans, they have other pressing issues. But the game changer in the short term is usual, right? So there's these usual short-term blips, so it will be. But then somebody will scoop up that property that they'll sell cheap.
Okay, so the Chinese might not be fine, but you know, Ken Griffin just spent $250 million on a penthouse here in New York. But you say property prices in the city is still expected to drop this year?
Definitely, and by the way, the $238 million he spent is raw. So imagine what it's going to cost to build out 24,000 square feet of space.
Yeah, when you say raw, just basically walls.
Exactly.
Nothing else, he has to decorate, throw in a pool.
No, I don't think even walls. I think just raw.
Wow, so that is an empty space, and that's probably a lot of money for his decorators.
Well, they were just, you know, sometimes when you're in a competitive situation and you want to get the listing, you know, you say it's worth more than maybe you really think it is in order to secure the listing. And that's likely what happened in both these cases. They were always worth more or less what they traded at.
What does this mean for this market, for what you've been seeing, at least for the past couple of years? Because we talked earlier today, we've been talking pre-Lehman, and now levels seem to be leveling off. But what have you seen in the past couple of years, especially here in New York City in the luxury apartment market?
Well, I find that New York City just about escaped everything. You know, we're very fortunate on a residential luxury market standpoint.
Why do you suppose that was?
You know, I think that people in New York didn't have to sell. So there was no underwater, there was no having to sell. You know, sellers were secure in their money, so it wasn't an issue.
They didn't need the income. They didn't have to sell for the income.
Exactly, or for the proceeds or for anything else. Nobody was forcing them. So I think that was a difference between us and Vegas, us and Florida, us and all the other markets that weren't good.
These two apartments that we're talking about at 778 Park, You say there were marketing errors. What exactly does that mean?
Well, what I meant in that discussion was that they overpriced it, likely to secure a listing, or they made a mistake.
I'm just wondering, what does that mean for property prices? Is there a bargain? How much are we expecting them to be down this year?
Well, we definitely see that it's a buyer's market, and not to pat ourselves on the back here, but buy the dip. Please buy the dip. We're seeing sellers being much more negotiable for this reason and other reasons. So it's really a good time to be shopping. And by the way, we have not even had a day off. All we're doing is showing. People aren't biting yet, but they'll bite soon. And then there'll be competition to buy property.
Yeah, okay, just quickly, I just want to put a dollar figure to it, but you're expecting property prices to be down 10%?
10%, maybe more. Depends on the pocket, right? Because it's always a pocket of real estate. So the Upper East Side is depressed.
Right.
Greenwich Village is not, right? So Greenwich Village is very expensive at its
Yep.
peak pricing still.
Yeah.
Co-op,
Yeah.
it's a small building, 6 units. So people, they're very cautious who they want as their neighbors. So all of that makes it more difficult.
When we look at the year ahead, what are some of the things you're worried about?
Well, certainly an interest rate spike, but we don't expect it.
Right.
People are now playing arbitrage. We were just talking about the house that sold for $94 million in Bel Air. The guy took a $58 million mortgage on that house. He has a $560,000 a month mortgage payment. So clearly he's playing arbitrage. He's taking the money from the mortgage.
He can make more than 3.5%.
Right.
Doing whatever he's doing in the stock market or
Hedge fund or whatever he's doing.
Right.
Pricing.
Okay.
If you overprice something and you put it on the market, you suddenly don't have a sense of urgency from any purchaser because they realize, well, gee, this is going to be on the market for a while. There's no sense to rush in, and that wind up being the story.
And tell us,
It does increase the value of the property, but the properties were so wonderful. It's such a wonderful building. They were so beautiful, although maybe needed some work, but they were beautiful apartments. You almost didn't need, the star factor in the sales. Well, I guess it depends on your definition of reality. To me, the market was pretty much always at reality. I think the commercial markets were somewhat hit, other than the odd Google sale or something like that, because we could see going all through New York City, right? See all these holes. Nobody's building. Everybody can't secure financing at the right price level, so they're not building. They're not proceeding with deals they had made years ago. When the merry-go-round stopped, they didn't have a place to stay. So those markets, I think, are leveling off and finally, hopefully, seeing some light to get clearance for the future. But the residential high-end market really just never budged. I think everything's exciting but I guess that's how we feel about real estate.
This is what you do,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So to us, everything's exciting. A new building, a new trend in buildings.
And
when it's tough, that's when people have to really think. Versus, okay, we just do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you said, a lot of people just stay in their homes for many, many years.
Double the amount of time. That is so big, and I think it's so underreported. It is truly a huge trend because it doesn't pay to downsize. The people downsizing are finding I'm paying just as much money as I was in my comfortable home. Why am I doing that?
Lived in.
Luxury market?
Yeah.
I think the luxury market looks very good. I mean, everybody wants an apartment in New York. Everybody in China, everybody in Russia, everybody in India, wants an apartment in New York City. And as long as everybody wants an apartment in New York, and New York is a financial and otherwise wonderful capital of the world, we're going to be in good stead. It could only give you a gauge of the luxury market. So yes, the luxury market follows. So the banks did very well this year. Everything on the luxury level did well. What didn't do well is some of the non-luxury stuff, and that would follow that market versus the luxury market. Cyclical. But we really escaped it much better this time than the last few times. The last few times we're actually embroiled in the problem. I mean, this time...
What was the difference between last time and now?
Well, last time, all of the markets went down. This time, the luxury market stayed up, meaning that people didn't have to sell, so they waited for a very high price. There was no depth in that market.
But they knew that price was coming, did they
yes,
not?
Well, they thought they knew, and in fact, they did know that the price was coming, and they did get it, and they waited for it. And that's what we see happening this time. Last time, I think everyone lost confidence, so then all the markets went down, and we saw them go down. The mood and the tone is chipper, it's good, but there is really no absorption. I mean, if you really know the numbers, there's no depth to the market. I know almost every sale going on, which is probably not a good thing, but the sales are going on, so much better than last year.
So much better than last year, but if you compare it to 3 years ago,
right, that's where we fall off.
It still hurts.
Yeah, probably volume is off 40%. I mean, that's tremendous.
So are you seeing any forced sales? I mean, is it that bad in the luxury space?
I am seeing what I might know as a forced sale. The buyer may not know it's a forced sale, but yes, we are seeing forced sales.
Is there any change in the profile of luxury buyers right now? I mean, how many foreigners are coming in? What is the stronger dollar doing to this market?
The stronger dollar is hurting the market, hurting the condominium market, hurting the townhouse market vis-a-vis Europeans. So definitely people are...
Because last year they had a 30% off sale.
Exactly. And now they're saying, well, gee, I don't know. I had this much allocated to this, and now it's cost this much, so I'm not doing it.
Do you feel like the sellers think that the market is better than it is and the buyers think it's worse, or is it the opposite?
You know, it's funny you say that. Every buyer I have will send me all the negative statistics. I mean, literally on email. Consumer confidence is this, you know, mortgage rates are
that. So you should be able to get me a great deal.
Exactly. And every seller will say the stock market is up more than ever. You know, it's very funny. Yes.
2008 was a completely different thing because 2008 was a systemic problem. So people didn't know where the bottom was. That was the big fear. Okay, am I buying at the top waiting for the knife to fall? Is there going to be this horrible bottom dropping out of the market where everything readjusts to 50% off? So people weren't willing to jump in. We're hearing from clients that they are willing to jump in as soon as they can go and see properties because they don't think it's systemic. They think it's a one-off story, more akin to 9/11, where, you know, you say, well, there's a horrible tragedy, it's horrible, but we will survive this, it's not systemic, and therefore we want to be in real estate, wherever that is, whether that's New York or the Hamptons. We're getting a lot of calls for the Hamptons.
If we're New York City specific, Manhattan specific, I'm very optimistic about New York City and Manhattan specific. Outside Manhattan, I don't know. There are some areas that need work, that need other capital infusion, that need people to get involved. But New York City specific, very optimistic.
And don't have that cachet of being Manhattan.
Exactly. And don't have an island and don't have, you know, et cetera. Right, exactly. People are still looking for financing. They're having as hard a time as last year getting financing. It really hasn't eased up very much. The rates are very low, but it still hasn't eased up in terms of qualifying for the financing. And, you know, people are losing deals to finance at the closing table, which is really a disaster.
Now, this week has brought two pretty big deals. Of course, we had that landmark property Carlos Slim purchased on 82nd and 5th, one of the last sort of freestanding mansions on Fifth Avenue. $44 million, so fourth biggest ticket item, I guess, as far as townhouses go. Does that say anything about the market, or is it just an anomaly?
No, I think it does say something. I think it says there is confidence in the market, the high end. Look, someone with all that money doesn't really have to think about it. They want a trophy property. He thinks it's a reasonable price. It's an irreplaceable property, so why not?
And we still heard it needs a little bit of work and a little bit of redecorating.
It needs everything, but you can't replace it. So that makes it worthwhile.
High demand.
Yeah, exactly.
And Conan O'Brien's place at the Majestic sold as well.
Exactly, which again was a huge terraced, beautiful apartment that, you know, $25 million is really not a bad price.
Really expecting not much of a downturn, other than isolated cases, and those are the ones we're trying to all find.
Right, that's our job, to find those for our buyers.
Right, the people who need to sell, right? They're over leveraged. You know, the emperor has no clothes now. We're finding who's over leveraged, who can't afford to keep their property, and we're trying to find a buyer to match that seller situation. But we don't see the market going down overall very much in New York, again, more akin to the 9/11 story in the short term, only in the very short term. And in the long term, we expect next year a lot of pent-up demand and people to really step up, and there be a lot more buyers looking for, okay, I'm tired of waiting, I'm buying a property.
Well, they're still looking to sell apartments. There's actually quite a bit of inventory in Time Warner Center right at this moment. But it's all very high priced, so things aren't moving quickly. The same thing with 15 Central Park West. And probably the same thing with almost any big ticket item. I think the Plaza was the only one of the group that really was in a distressed situation, and everything selling there is selling at what you might think are distressed pricing.
Is there anything that is surprising to you right now, aside from perhaps the lack of depth, that you haven't seen? I mean, you have, you know, more than 20 years experience in this field that you haven't seen before.
Well, you know what I haven't seen before is people not only lacking confidence in the market itself to some degree, but also lacking what are the tax rates going to be? You know, people want all these things answered before they really plunge into a 10-year deal.
So you've never seen people so hesitant about wanting all these nitty-gritty details about maybe factors that are out of their control.
And that's the problem. You know, what's your state tax going to be? Is a Bush tax cut going to be repealed? You know, they don't know what's happening next year. You know, the governor of Connecticut is trying to take New York buyers. You know, it's all playing out that people are like, wait a minute, what's going on? What am I paying in taxes?
And it's making people hesitate.
Yes, more so than they would otherwise.
It was all American. You know, the Russians were out, the Chinese were out before, you know, we even said on Maria's show that China was a complete pause because of coronavirus. Of course, we didn't know we'd be on complete pause in 4 minutes.
Looking at that video, it's pretty crazy where we are today, right? We never thought that this would happen, this would come here. You know, we thought it was a their problem.
Right, and you know, look, it's incredible. I mean, just...
But buyer demand was usually from Silicon Valley, from a hedge fund, more
financial services. I mean, the way it's been for a long time, only we added the Chinese and the Russians and all the international buyers. So it was very localized by local. I mean, of course, New York, California, and everywhere else in the States.
People who were IPOing their big businesses, wanted to buy a big property, but it was mostly not international, whereas you could say...
In the past, it's 50-50.
50-50.
Yeah.
And it, depending on the time, it would be, you know, Chinese, Japanese, Russians, from people from Brazil, like, it all depends on, you know, what country is doing well.
Or poorly. Right, and they want to run away, flight capital, right.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it just depends, but now we see for the future that things are going to be more US based.
Right. And inquiring. We even got an email last night. We have a client who is overseas, I mean, in Monaco, they happen to be, and they are writing us, hey, what good deals are coming up? Remember that building I saw, you know, last December? Is that unit still available? They are absolutely reaching out to us if we're not already proactively reaching out to them. Yeah, they're 100% very invested in thinking there's a deal to be had, and they want to have that deal. So yes, very much so. Doesn't mean they'll conclude the deal, but they're inquiring, so that is a good sign. There is signs of life.
Yeah, there is definitely demand internationally. It's just that obviously
it's not 50-50.
It's not 50-50, and you know, they're going to want to get into that apartment again before they pull any trigger. So again, we are on a pause.
Life has changed, right? So it's not just the industry. So if you're not hugging people, right? We're big huggers. So if you're not hugging people,
very touchy.
Yeah, we're very touchy-feely people, right? Okay, kind of like that Spanish, Italian, you know, kind of background. So, you know, that has to change, right? We're not even, for Dr. Fauci.
Right, he's espousing every day that the handshake should be a long forgotten way
ritual.
of introducing oneself. Yeah.
Right. So maybe it'll be like the Japanese where you bow, or maybe you're going to do some one of these, or you know, God knows what you're going to do, but you're probably not going to be hugging and kissing and shaking hands very soon. So yes, and that is a form of showing warmth. So it's harder to show warmth if you're 6 feet away or 8 feet away, right? So it's going to have to be a little more formal than it was. So I think that changes everything. The fact that it's more formal. Open houses, for example, I think we always had the private banking model of open houses being by appointment only. So that will continue for us. I think that will change for generally other brokers, right? No seller who lives in an apartment is going to want 30 people in his house.
Right.
Well, I think it's stay the course, right? First of all, know your data. Know what is selling, know what isn't selling, know why it's selling. You know, really get into the details of information. I mean, I was very fortunate that I came into the business as an accountant. And as an accountant, you're looking at details constantly. That's your life, is details. So I wanted to know what price per square foot this building's selling at, what price per square foot that building is selling at, what the absorption rate is. Did it take 3 months? Did it take 3 years? You know, and the only way you could be credible with any buyer is if you know that detail. And the same thing with a seller. Seller wants to know, you know it cold. Now you have the time. Stay home, learn it cold. Do it building by building, do it property by property, do it neighborhood by neighborhood. Learn your data that then you can build on. Because now you actually have the time to do that. Right. Exactly. And now with the markets being totally transparent, right? because of Realtor.com, because of Zillow. Everybody knows everything, and they think they know it better than you, and often they do. So you better make that an even playing field at least. But the good news is, home is clearly going to be more important than ever. You know, we have clients with, 10 homes. Where did they go hunker down? The Hamptons. They didn't go hunker down in Wyoming.
Which is actually interesting.
Interesting. We would have thought they would have gone to Wyoming. They're big ranches, 10,000 acres, but they decided that they want to be closer to family. They want to be closer to good medical, and they don't want to hunker down in Wyoming. I could see those things coming on the market.